Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. There's a lot of celebration going on today, and it's such a pleasure to have 5 different organizations today for this event focused on nature ambition. So, anyone who arrives, I invite you to sit more towards the front to make sure you can hear us. I also invite our speakers to make sure you really speak with a lot of grit and speak loudly so that we can all hear you. And also a special thank you to the Spanish Pavilion for really allowing this space for us to be together and to share some examples of what we're each doing to really advance on corporate nature action. What these 5 organizations are going to be sharing is how they're each making an effort really to protect and restore nature, which is so essential to climate stability, economic resilience, and human well-being. And I will be moderating the event. My name is Camila Cauer. I belong to Poretica, which is a Spanish sustainability business association. We work with over 200 companies and nonprofits that are really committed to learning and advancing on their environmental and social impact. And we actually have a working group as well of committed companies that really want to learn how to develop nature strategies, set ambitious science-backed goals, and also to exchange the knowledge that they have. So to start, I would like to introduce our 5 exceptional panel of leaders that really kind of represent globally what is going on in nature. First of all, we have Marco Lambertini, who is the convener of the Nature Positive Initiative. We have Omar Reina, who is the head of environmental strategy at Neo Energia. We have Marina Esteves, researcher of environmental policy and economics program at Fundación Getulio Vargas. We have Isabela Modelli de Brito Santana, who is a sustainability specialist at MAPFRE in Brazil. And we also have Maria Azul Schwarzman, who is the engagement manager of decarbonization and just transition at the World Benchmarking Alliance. Thank you so much all for being here today with us and to share how you are each taking action on nature protection and restoration. So I would like to get started with Marco Lambertini. We understand that Nature Positive Initiative is one of the leading organizations to ensure that we're all making effort really to change the trend, right, of having a more harmful impact on nature, but instead really be more in a harmonious line, right? So it's truly an opportunity to have you here, and I would love for you to explain what is really Nature Positive Initiative's mission, and why is it really playing such a critical role in accelerating the global transformation?
Thank you, Camila. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for Etica, and congratulations for the coalition of businesses you have put together. And also, let me say congratulations, thank you to Spain as one of the most progressive governments in the European Union at this time when, unfortunately, other countries in the Union are pushing back on the environmental agenda and sustainability regulations. So Spain, please stay the course, continue to be a champion of sustainability. Nature Positive is a recent concept, but a very intuitive one. It's a concept about a future with more nature, no less. That's the simple vision of a nature positive future. It's a future where we reverse the trend of a nature negative economy of today, where for many centuries, but particularly the last few decades, we've seen a sharp acceleration of the decline of nature and biodiversity and the destabilization of critical Earth systems that are fundamental to honestly maintain life on the planet, maintain the Earth as a living planet, and contributing so much to our own development. Now, it's quite easy to point the finger to the bad nature negative economy of the last few decades. But if you look at it, it's been producing a lot of benefits and advances for humanity. I was looking at some statistics about just 8 years ago, and you know, you have at the beginning of the 20th century, you have two-thirds of the global population in extreme poverty. Life expectancy in today is about 10%. Life expectancy was below 50 years old. Now is almost 80. Child mortality was 40% before puberty. Now is 4%. So there's been a lot of progress in the last several decades that was based on a nature negative approach. So we shouldn't blame that model because it has generated a lot of improvements in the way people live today. But what we need to acknowledge today is that that model is not fit for purpose anymore. It's reaching the point where it's beginning to affect the very systems that have sustained that model. And because nature is weakening, natural resources are getting more scarce, the economic model of today is an economic model destroying its own foundation. So that's why change is inevitable, change is necessary, but particularly change is the only option we have to develop a better future, to continue to improve the lives of people. That's the new, if you like, a cultural revolution where we need to understand that we have to stop taking nature for granted. We have to stop considering nature as infinite. We have to stop isolating ourselves from nature, and we have to stop considering nature as a free input in society. Today, nature in our economy. Today, nature is economically valuable only when it's dead. A tree has an economic value when it's cut down and sold as timber. A fish when it's caught and served on our plate, not when they are part of a forest or the ecosystem of the ocean and contribute to the stability of those ecosystems with all the services and the benefits that these ecosystems provide to us for free. And I finish just with one statistic. Today, land ecosystem, forests and wetlands, and the ocean are sequestering more than half of the CO2 emissions coming from our activities. More than half. Without nature playing the vital role of absorbing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the Earth ecosystems, we will be already past 2 degrees of global warming. So that's what nature is about. Nature is our best life insurance in moving forward, and we have to stop on this nature negative approach and transition to a nature positive future, a future where we are developing, continuing to benefit from nature, but making sure that at the end of our use of natural resources, there is actually more nature, no less, and it's possible. So maybe we can talk later about how we can get there.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcos. I completely agree. I think the World Economic Forum a few years ago indicated, right, how more than half of the world's GDP depends moderately or highly. But we all know that more and more we're trying to understand, right, not just the direct impacts or services of nature, but it's a lot more complex. So it's important to understand that relationship and make sure that then that relationship has a more positive trend. So now we're going to hear from a company that is going to tell us exactly how they're really ensuring that they're having a more positive relationship with nature. We're going to hear from Neoenergia, which at least in Spain we know as subsidiary of Iberdrola. So already in the fight towards climate change, energy is so important, right? Providing renewable, cleaner energy. But now let's focus a little bit more on the nature aspect. So Omar, it would be great if you could tell us more about how Iberdrola, Neoenergia are really addressing biodiversity within their strategies, and how is this ambition then being implemented into practice?
Hi Camila, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. For some of you that may not know Neoenergia, we are part of the Iberdrola group, as Camila said, and we are one of the largest energy companies in Brazil. We work in the generation, transmission, and distribution sectors, delivering energy to more than 40 million Brazilians across our 5 distributors in mostly in the northeast of Brazil. And last year we were the biggest investors in infrastructure in Brazil with 1.6 billion euros in infrastructure. Sustainability is definitely one of the main drivers of the Iberdrola Group's strategy implementation. And we focus on 3 main pillars, which are climate change, biodiversity, and circular economy. And for this strategy to be implemented, we have 30 targets, sustainability targets, and one of each target have its respective action plans in order to be achieved. One of these targets is specifically related to biodiversity, and this would be to have net positive impact across all of our operations. And when we think about this, I mean, in generation, we feel more comfortable with this target. And this target is to have net positive impact by 2030. So for generation, we feel more comfortable because of local regulation and because generation assets are usually in a specific place. So it's easier to monitor fauna and also vegetation. But when we think about networks, the challenge is huge. And basically, for 3 main reasons. The first one is that for networks, we do not have a very robust local regulation for species, for instance. In some areas, if it's an urban area, obviously we do not need an environmental license, but depending on the area, we do need one. So we need to go beyond local regulation, and in Iberdrola Group, we do understand that in some cases, such as climate change and biodiversity, we do need to go beyond local regulation. The second challenge is that we have an extensive set of networks, right? We have more than 845,000 square kilometers, which equals the territory of Spain and the UK together. So obviously we have to work on a methodology so that this would be achievable and that will be real to the Brazilian context. And the third one is, as I said, the Brazilian context, because we are pretty rich in biodiversity and ecosystems and species as well. So for this to be possible, we are pretty aligned with the Iberdrola Group, and we have worked on a methodology very collaboratively with NGOs and research academies, so that this metric is viable and we can achieve net positive impact by 2030. I think the second important thing for us in this target is that we are aligned with global frameworks. So for instance, science-based target for nature and the TNFD have been really important for us to implement this and to align with these frameworks, so that we also not only have global references, but we do speak a common language with the market and with investors. So I think for me, implementing this target and leading the implementation at the corporate level, the COP in the Amazon has been incredible, because it's sort of the moment that we can be here and be in touch with this biome, and we can maybe go back to the office and go back to our routines and remember and be inspired and work even harder so that we can achieve, and all of us, we work on this agenda. So I think this is very, very positive also for the agenda.
Thank you, Omar. Totally agree. I think maybe all of you have had this experience so far of being here in Belén and walking outside and getting to see the beautiful, amazing nature. And it's a really great reminder of how connected we are with it and how much we want it to really be thriving, because we depend on it. And thank you so much for sharing what Neoenergia is doing to really set a goal, which is already a huge commitment, to state it publicly, say we want to be nature positive, and then also turn that into action, which is definitely a huge challenge. And we totally understand that part of also regulation, right? Every country is different and regulations also change, but I think you said the key of really going maybe above regulation, really being proactive as a company, and also knowing we can't do it alone. We really need to collaborate with other expert organizations to make sure we are getting it right. So thank you so much. Now we're going to get to hear from another type of stakeholder, going from corporate to more an educational institution, which is Fundación Getulio Vargas. Marina Esteves, we know that you guys were leading a project called Anchoring Sustainable Value Chains in Brazil. This was funded partially by the EU Alinvest Verde program, and also in collaboration with the Spanish Chamber of Commerce. Boretica, we also had the pleasure to kind of work alongside you guys. We also did a report from Spain, and all of the effort, the objective really was to really help SMEs, right? They're also a really key part. At least in Europe, I can say they really make around 99% of the corporate economy, right? So they are so important in part of that transformation. So you guys were doing just that, really helping SMEs to prepare, and I believe more through like circular solutions. So I would love to ask you, Marina, could you tell us a little bit more about how this project supported the transition to a circular and low carbon economy among SMEs from the Brazilian value chains?
Perfect. Thank you, Camila. Thank you, Foretica, for inviting me to the panel. Thank you, the Pavilion of Spain as well. It's a pleasure being here. All my teammates here in the panel as well. It's great to speak after Omar and after Marco because you guys both brought things that are important to my speech here. That is to present this project, Anchoring Value Chains in Brazil. So with these partnerships with the Spanish Chamber of Commerce, we chose two companies, two Spanish companies, one of them being Neoenergia and the other one being Telefónica, two sectors that are not usually associated with circular economy and best practice on sustainability. So that's why we thought it was important to address these types of companies and how are there not only these anchor companies such as Neoenergia and Telefónica, that is a telecom enterprise, but all the supply chain, so the medium and the small companies that make part of the business and of the operation of these anchor companies. So the project was based on constructing, on building capacity on these small and medium and micro as well companies, regarding those two anchor companies as well, the one that I had already talked about. And we addressed these types of small business in first place, making like a roadmap and making a diagnosis of how these companies, they are seeing and watching circular economy in their practices and how would they improve their practices as well. So first of all, we make these diagnoses, like which indicators those companies were evaluating when they are talking about sustainability, such as, for example, we made a total of 61 indicators to evaluate those companies regarding the environmental dimension, for example, environmental responsibility, life cycle assessment of the materials, products and services, innovation and markets, energy, combustion, stationary combustion, mobile combustion as well, transports, and how would they be in this map of sustainability. So what we had at first place were that these companies, these small and medium companies, they were not that much into sustainability, not because they were not willing to do so, but because they did not have the capacity to do so, or even they did not know how to achieve those bigger sustainability indicators, because they are small companies. So they would not be, for example, regulated by regulated carbon markets or other type of initiatives that would obligate them to have a sustainability plan. So that's why it is important to have anchor companies, because those anchor companies, they cascade their commitments into the small and medium business that we saw. So in the first in the first part of the evaluation, the companies, they perform like, I would say, rather medium to like low grades. And when we after the project, when we analyzed again we had like capacity building, we have training, we had workshops, we had reports being made in those types of sectors that were not usually much more evolved on sustainability. And the second evaluation that we did, these companies, they had achieved a much more higher level of knowledge and of competency of achieving those sustainability goals. So, for example, they would not, for example, understand how life cycle assessment would increase or decrease their emissions gap or their carbon emissions, and how would this actually relates to nature conservancy and nature protection, for example. So we taught them and we built together those principles. Some of the principles that they were like principles, but they are really flexible and they change when we talk about each company in each one of these economy cycles. So we address, for example, what would be best for economic model. Would it be like a linear economic model, as Omar had, for example, mentioned? We extract, we use, and then we discard, we waste. So we taught them how to think about a circular economy. So the circular economy is not like a circle itself, it is more like many agencies, many types of relating to these different types of process. For example, we had the extractivist moment, and then we had, like, for example, the design that would have to address many other ways of reusing this object before you would be discarded, before you would be wasted. So in these companies, for example, we have engineering companies, we have optic fiber, for example, when we talk about the telecom, we have, for example, mining and constructing these energy plants in the case of Neoenergia, for example. So it was a project that was really interesting in that case because we could evaluate these small and medium companies in the beginning of the process and after all the process, and how they incorporate those sustainability indicators and this mentality of circular economy to reduce the impact on nature, to reduce their impact on climate as well. So here we have like a nature solution, a nature type of acting in the nature that would be not that harmful to nature, but we also have like a co-benefit of reducing emissions and of reducing impacts on many populations that are close to those extractivist operations and so on. So these are some examples of the project. I hope to speak a little bit more in the other question, but thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. And I think you really hit the nail when you said, I think a lot of these SMEs, of course, they want to be more sustainable. They want to do their part on decarbonizing or maybe having practices that are not so harmful to nature, but they have a lot less resources or maybe the knowledge or capacity. So these types of collaborations between Fundación Getulio Vargas, Telefónica, Neoenergia, Iberdrola is so important to really capacitate them and make sure they are part of the change. Because they do definitely they're part of that kind of scope 3, right? Which is a big part of either the emissions or we like to say the impact that companies have. It's so essential. So thank you so much for sharing. And we're still, geographically, we're going to remain in Brazil still. So we're going to hear from Isabela from MAPFRE, Brazil. And you are implementing a nature-based solution. And the project is called, if I say it right, Project Floresta, which is really focusing on the plantation of trees. And this is supposed to really, really help you guys in terms of your way onto decarbonization. So I don't want to reveal too much, but I would love to ask you first, what really motivated MAPFRE to design this project and to implement this forest reforestation project?
So first of all, I'd like to thank you and Forestica and the Spanish Pavilion to inviting us to be part of this discussion. And it's an honor to be here in name of MAPFRE. And first of all, I would like to explain the Floresta MAPFRE or Forest MAPFRE project. And before it, I would like to explain about MAPFRE. So outside Spain, I know that in Spain, everybody knows MAPFRE. It's a very famous and common insurance company. But in Brazil, we do have a large operationalization of MAPFRE insurance here. So this is our second largest market in the world. And this is why it's so important to have a project in Brazil. And MAPFRE, as an insurance company, we are here in COP30, in Casa do Seguro, or insurance house that is right next here, the blue pavilion, the blue zone. And we are here to address how the insurance can the insurance companies can be part of the solution and not just keeping the companies working after a disaster. And this is why MAFRE has developed the Floresta MAFRE. That is a project of restoration of 29.42 hectares of native seeds in the center east of São Paulo in a state park that is called Carlos Botelho. And in this park, we are doing this restoration project because of a part that was damaged with exotic species. And this project is very important for us because demonstrates how MAFRE is been part of the solution, and as I've said before, and it demonstrates how our sustainability strategy it is being demonstrated within all our goals, not only our speeches, but in how we can do proactive projects such as this one. Additionally, MAFRE sustainability plan that comes from 2024 to 2026 emphasize the natural capital management and biodiversity protection. So this is our strategic pillars here. And in the second part of the question, I will explain how which positive impacts we expect with this project.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think it's very interesting. I do think insurance companies are really key for kind of putting to light just how important it is to take action. Insurances understand what the risk is, really, if we don't take action. I think it's been easier to understand on the term of climate risk, but more and more as well on nature. And they really are kind of complement each other as well. Thank you much for sharing. And can't wait to see also how the project progresses. And now we're going to turn on to the World Benchmarking Alliance, to Maria. From Foretica, we really always follow your work because it really helps to understand on a global level how leading companies are really doing in terms of social impact, human rights, in terms of climate action, in terms of food. So you really kind of set the metric to understand where do we need to advance. So based on your assessments, it'd be great if you could share with us really how many companies are really assessing and disclosing their nature-related impacts and dependencies, and also how many of them do you see that are really doing targeted action?
Thank you, Camila. Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes. So thank you, Camila. Thank you, the Spanish Pavilion, for having us. For those of you who don't know us, we're the World Benchmarking Alliance, an international organization that focuses on benchmarking the 2,000 biggest companies of the world. This is not an opt-in, opt-out list. This list is based on their revenue, their people they employ, how far their supply chains reach, and of course the GHG emissions that they represent. So before going concretely to the companies, I wanted to go back to a little bit of what's the context internationally, right? Because we are at a climate change conference, but I think this conference in particular here in Belém shows us that nature and climate and land degradation, they're all interconnected, and the Global Biodiversity Framework from the CBD in its Target 15 clearly articulates that countries, signatory countries, will have to eventually ask their large companies to disclose their impacts, their risks, and their dependencies on nature. So this is where our benchmarking lays, right? So under this context, understanding what the CBD is calling countries to do is that we set a list of targets to assess companies, of course, in climate, social, food metrics, and of course nature as well. So particularly on our nature benchmark, we have been doing this benchmark for 2 years now. We started in 2022. We're on our third benchmarking cycle. So far, we've assessed over 800 of the largest companies of the world and across 20 industries. As a general overview, we can see that particularly the sectors of personal and household products and pharmaceuticals are the ones showing leadership, but then high impact sectors such as construction, engineering and freight and logistics are lagging behind. I think our key finding that it directly links with Target 15 of the Global Biodiversity Framework is that nature is a blind spot for companies. Only 5% of them assess their impacts to nature, and less than 1% assess their dependencies. So this is like a two-way street, right? Because it's for the environment, but also it's a risk assessment exercise for the companies to understand their links and dependencies with nature. Without understanding the risks that lay within the natural capital they're using, companies cannot prioritize or govern or invest strategically. So we do think that this is something companies should be looking into. Then other key findings of our assessment show that companies overwhelmingly disregard indigenous people and local communities' rights, and this is very important as they represent 40%. Like in 40% of protected lands, indigenous peoples are leading this protection, so it's essential that they embed their perspective in their nature planning. Then, regarding water, water insecurity is rising, but companies, they need to accelerate their water stewardship. Some companies disclose their water use and requirements, but fewer companies disclose pollutants that are being thrown in the water. This is, of course, essential for so many operations. Then regarding plastics, she was talking about circular economy, and I think this is one of the trickiest items of them all, because companies have very big announcements plastic-wise, but they struggle to back these announcements with actual data. So we have that 43% of the assessed companies mention work on plastics, but only 19 report quantitative data that backs this reporting. And only 7 set actual targets to reduce their plastic consumption. And then last but not least, we also find that more leadership is needed at the top. 66% of the companies assessed assign sustainability oversight to their boards, but to be honest, less than 3% of board level members show expertise in biodiversity, or even to go as further as climate. So yeah, we can go a little bit deeper on some Spanish examples maybe later, but this is just to have a general overview of where we stand in terms of companies assessing their risks, their impacts, and their dependencies on nature.
Thank you so much, Maria. I think I got stuck there with the percentages that you shared. Less than 5% assess their impacts, and 1% assess their dependencies. So I think we need a lot more awareness, a lot more measurement to understand really what the company relationship is with nature, to ensure that they're having a better relationship and also reducing that impact, and just gaining awareness of how much we need to really take action on. So thank you much for sharing. And now we're gonna start again with another round of questions. So I'm gonna address to Marco. You were sharing a bit of Nature Positive Initiative and how we need to really reverse that trend to make sure it's positive. And I know that there's a lot of companies that are really kind of jumping on that bandwagon that really want to make that commitment. So if companies do want to make that commitment, I would love for you to share with us what are the key actions that organizations need to take to really achieve the transformation for 2030.
Yeah, so to add to the statistics, 5%, 1%, 0% measure outcomes of nature. And that's where really is the big gap, because we've seen over the last several decades a lot of companies doing a lot of good things for nature, but simply was not enough. And that's the enough question is really the question we've been struggling with until very recently. But in 2022, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity approved for the first time, 196 countries, the global goal for nature of halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. That is the new reference point. And so, to your question, Camila, companies, first of all, need to commit to that goal, commit to contribute to nature positive, halt and reverse. Secondly, they need to assess their impact, not necessarily everything, but the most relevant, the most material impacts that they are having on nature. Also, of course, connected to their dependencies, because this is where the business case is stronger, but also related to the impact that are having negative externalities on society. Because, you know, we talk about dependencies, and that's very good. But business, by impacting nature, also impacts society, individual well-being, individual health, equity. So there are two dimensions here that business needs to take into account. One is the dependencies, the double materiality of nature for business in terms of strengthening the resilience, but also the impacts that they are generating on society. Then, once they understand the impact, they need to begin to address those impacts, respond. And so that's where targets, strategies come into place. And finally, but perhaps the most important step, they also need to start measuring the results of those responses. So the framework on metrics is very simple. Measure the impacts, measure the responses, but also measure the outcome. And the outcome has to be about the state of nature. The outcome has to be about delivering positive results for nature in their operations and in their supply chains. Only in that way they can really contribute to the overall global goal for nature of halt, reverse biodiversity loss. And it is about four things. It is about avoiding impacts when it's possible. It's about mitigating, reduces impact when it's not possible to avoid entirely the impact. Invest in restoration in situ, in setting, to recover the inevitable impacts. And finally, if they want to go beyond that level to achieve a net positive outcome, invest in restoration beyond the level of impacts that they're generating. That generates the ultimate net positive, nature positive contribution. So, you know, it's a lot to do, and it's a lot of change required. And this is a journey. It's not something that should happen overnight. And my message to companies that start this journey is always start where is more material to you, start where you know you have impacts, and then as you deepen your understanding of your impacts, evolve your strategy to address in a deeper way, a more holistic way, your impacts in moving forward. We can't expect company to shift from the nature negative practices of today, because honestly, there is no company in the world today that has holistically nature positive. And so it can't happen overnight. And we need to give companies the confidence to start the journey and the tools to measure in a practical but credible way their progress. This is what we are trying to provide as a nature positive initiative, a framework and the guidance for companies, investors, insurance, to credibly, but also in an affordable way, measure the outcomes of their transitions. And we will publish next year in the first quarter a very simple set of metrics that we hope will incentivize many more companies than the one that were mentioned earlier on to start this journey. Because, you know, look, you know, nature is complicated, but we got to agree on some credible proxies that are good enough, not perfect, but good enough to demonstrate and to drive action for nature positive outcomes. Otherwise, companies like it's happening now will be so intimidated by the complexity and will just don't move, you know, or they move but they don't talk, or they talk but they don't really disclose entirely what they're doing. So it's a moment of impasse where we need to really incentivize companies to start the journey. And hopefully these metrics that will be announced next year will help in the journey.
Great, thank you so much, Marco. I think we will all look forward to reading that report and a guide that is easy to understand and can really support these companies. I know, at least from our experience from Foretica with our working group of companies, it's a mix of really leading companies that already are on that journey to really implement projects and also measure their outcomes, and others maybe are starting that journey. So I think it's really key to have these groups, to have these different organizations share their experience and knowledge on how they can do this. It is definitely one thing to set a goal. It's really important to publicly say we're committed to this, let the stakeholders know, but then also kind of measure how that progress is going. So that's the key, and that's what we're working on how can we really measure not only your dependencies and impacts, but then once you implement certain projects, what are those outcomes? So excited to see that report. And now we're going to hear back from Neoenergia, understanding also that for a company to take action, I think you are measuring also, we need to also file guidance and standards. So I think you had mentioned TNFD, Omar. So I would like for you to share a little bit, considering how there are more and more frameworks like TNFD, well, we have ESRS, the IFRS. How is Neoenergia really, how does it view the alignment of its strategy with these standards? And also, what approach is it taking to really ensure it is disclosing transparently?
Yeah, I wanted to first comment a bit on what Isabella was bringing to the table. Congratulations on the project. That reminded me also that Energia and Iberdrola, we recently launched a joint venture called Carbon to Nature. That's the objective of Carbon to Nature is for reforestation. In Brazil, we already have one project in Da Cerrado, which is a Brazilian biome. And eventually they will work on commercializing carbon credits. And Marco, very interesting what you just mentioned. I think it has everything to do with what we are doing in Neoenergia, so we can have a talk on that later. But yeah, about your question, Camila, I just wanted to. I think we're regarding frameworks. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we're moving from a more qualitative approach to a more financial approach. So ESRS and IFRS and TNFD, they are really focusing on quantifying what would be the impacts and what would be the impacts also for the company's financial statements. And in Brazil, we have a huge challenge because the CVM, which is the regulator for listed companies, they will demand Brazilian companies to disclose adopting the IFRS framework. And mainly, the biggest change would be to disclose sustainability impacts within the financial reports. I think this is great. I think this is a huge challenge. Depending on the sector, I mean, for us would be more related maybe to climate, and maybe a next step will be biodiversity. But this means that CEOs and board members will need to sign these financial reports, taking knowledge on what would be the impacts. So I think this is going to move more to a C-level, and they will, and more information will be taken in account for decision investments and for basically the decision of the operation of companies. So I think this is great. I think also in Energia we're quite comfortable because in Europe we're already reporting with, you see, the European standards, the ESRS, and both frameworks they have a lot of synergies, obviously, which is also great. But yeah, I mean, we've also seen that these frameworks, they are private initiatives, right? But the tendency is that some governments or regulators, they are starting to adopt them as a mandatory requirement. This is happening in Brazil. There are many other countries that are looking into this. For sure, companies that adopt these frameworks first as non-mandatory, they will be better prepared when they become a regulation. So I think it's definitely a challenge, specifically when we think of biodiversity, measuring into financial impacts and eventually disclosing that to the market. But we are positive, we are optimistic. We have organizations as Nature Positive with Marco and many others that are working on these metrics and to make sure that we adopt the right metrics and that we can continue to move forward.
Thank you so much, Omar. It's great to hear that this is going to be really a requirement for companies in Brazil to be reporting what that impact is. Also, as you said, it really has to be kind of part of that financial report so that at the top level, they're very aware, right? So that when they make decisions, they're taking that information into account. And of course, I know from the EU, there's been so much push, right, for reporting. But really, the impact cannot be done unless the rest of the world is going to do it, right? Because our value chains are very, very broad and complex and global. So thank you for sharing. And now we're going to hear from Isabella from MAPFRE. you were sharing about the Project Floresta and how you're going to be restoring about 29.42 hectares of trees by 2028. And would love to hear, could you tell us a bit more of, we keep talking about measuring and what are outcomes, so what positive impact does MAPFRE expect from implementing this project?
So the first of them is to restore the 29 hectares in a native biome that is very damaged in Brazil. We are here in Amazonia, but we do have other biomes, as our colleague said, as Omar said, as Cerrado, and in this case it is in Atlantic Forest, that it's one of the most damaged biomes in Brazil. So this restoration is like a very important thing to be done, because in this part of Brazil, we do have the most part of population, and we do not have more native forest, almost. So that's very important. It's a very important impact, environmental impact. And we expect to have more than 5,000 CO2 absorbed by this project by 2028, and we are going to use this absorbed CO2 to our inventory, annual inventory, to be to compensate our emissions. And along with this, we do have a biodiversity recovery there. So we have nature species that is only found in this part of this biome. We are going to enhance the habitat connectivity and support the recovery of this area and these species there. About the social and economic benefits, we expect to integrate the local community, because we are generating more than 50 employments to local community, and it makes this project more it's easier to these people to understand what it's been done, because they are working there. So it's good for our community and to the people that use the park. So it's one of the social benefits we expect. And about the governance of the project, we expect an enhance of our reputation as a sustainability insurance company in Brazil. We do want to be the #1 insurance company with ESG aspects in Brazil today, and we already had this acknowledgement, but we want to keep on this #1 post to have the stakeholder trust and to improve our reputation in this point. So that's one of the points that I would like to put on the table.
Thank you so much, Isabella. I think very important to acknowledge, right? Companies, we think, should be taking action, should be more ethical, should do good projects, but I think you can put the point of what's the business incentive, right? And I think maybe that part of reputation, well, we build a good reputation, right? We show that we go beyond insurance and we really care about our clients, then we might as well put in the action, put in those projects and report. I think you also touched the really important part, which is also the social component. We're not just here to decarbonize, to lower emissions, to plant trees, but what is in it for the people that live in the area, right? And we depend on those people, and so I'd love to hear that there's that collaboration. Thank you so much for sharing. Now I would love to go back to Marina de Fundación Getulio Vargas. It's so exciting to hear the work that you're also doing with SMEs, since they're such an important stakeholder as well. So in part of the project that you've been doing, could you tell us a little bit more? I know you're trying to help them develop more circular practices, but how does this really translate for them in the protection of nature?
Yes, so with the small and medium enterprises, as I was saying, it's kind of hard to, for example, to stimulate and to make them understand the importance of sustainability, because, for example, there will be those enterprises, the medium and the small enterprises, they will be not affected by regulated regulated initiatives such as the IFRS or regulated carbon markets. So that's why it's important to address, to build this capacity of teaching and of learning together how the circular economy works in those types of environments. For example, in the project we used a concept based on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that adopts like three basic concepts of circular economy. The first one being reducing waste by reducing the pressure of new materials, that was saying, for example, to change this mindset of a linear economy to a multi-circular economy, for example. The second point is maximizing the usage of any component of any material. So this topic addresses, for example, the design of a product that has to be thought to have as many usage as possible before being wasted. And when it goes to waste, for example, other business, other companies, other chains can grab this waste and it becomes their primary material, for example. And the third component is that we were seeing right now, this regenerate natural system through composting or regenerating. So once I was interviewing a person that said to me that he did not know any technology that is better than photosynthesis to reduce carbon emissions and to address the nature crisis and the climate crisis. They are both so intertwined that we cannot make a difference. For example, if we do not preserve or restore nature, we can say goodbye to our climate actions and for our climate initiatives, for example. So we cannot separate those types of agendas. So that's why circular economy is so important to be discussed in a climate conference, because the way that we make business, the way that we address economy is the prime principle to address this new type of economy that is based not only on circular motives, but on co-benefits to people and other human rights initiatives that are so important to imagine and to be in this new kind of world that we all wanted to be right now. So these three principles, they were in the base of our project with those small and medium companies, thinking that these small and medium companies will not be at the first moment responsible to address regulated initiatives such as the one that we were talking about. So that is it.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's great to see examples of how you're really preparing them, sharing knowledge of best practices, what's already on the ground, but also kind of that challenge of how can we use creativity to envision different ways of developing business models. You were sharing about how can we find value in, for example, waste. What can we do with that? How can we collaborate with other businesses? So thank you for sharing the example. And now I'd like to turn to Maria from the World Benchmarking Alliance. Would love to hear, I heard that supposedly you have a couple of leading practice examples from companies on nature, and some of them may actually be from Spain. So what a great place to share this.
Yeah, so before, I think my intervention was a bit gloomy, throwing a lot of data, saying companies are not doing enough, but within our benchmark, we have three Spanish companies that are doing very well, actually, and two of them I know, and I'm not from Spain, so I think they're very well known. So the first one is Acciona. So out of the over 800 companies that we assess, Acciona ranks 14, which is pretty high up, I would say. And they're number one within their own group, which is construction and engineering, and they show strong governance, strategic alignment on nature, and they have some room to improve in terms of disclosing their impact and dependency assessments. Then we have SACIR, that ranks 37 out of the 816 companies we've assessed. They are the second in construction and engineering, so number one and number two are both Spanish companies. And it's the other way around. They have a very good performance in their disclosures on ecosystem and biodiversity risks and dependencies, but they have room to strengthen their community engagement and social inclusion. And then we have Inditex, also a very famous apparel sector brand. They rank third within their group and 28 out of the whole company world. And they are very strong in governance and social inclusion, but again, they have room to enhance their impact/dependency assessments. Having said that, and taking on the words of some of our colleagues here that were talking about a more integrated approach to a company planning, and this is something I want you all to leave with. I think that now we're entering a new phase regarding how companies assess and plan the next 10, 15 years of their practice. So we at the World Benchmarking Alliance, as I was telling you, we also analyze companies on their transition plans. This is in our climate department, but it's not only analyzing the target they're setting, it's analyzing where their investments are going, where their capex is going, where their R&D investments are going. It's analyzing onto which pathways they are thinking their transition planning. It is, of course, analyzing their targets and how then that performance aligns or not. And we're thinking, as in climate, we're approaching a more integrated approach. We also have just transitions indicators, analyzing if companies engage in social dialogue or not, if they have strong links with their workers' councils, if they're doing, if they pay a minimum wage, if they engage their supply chains. So I think we need to go beyond, right? Assessing companies on climate, on nature, on social practices. We need to start to think of an integrated transition planning approach. And this is both for the company to plan what's next for them, but also for us as civil society, but also governments to start thinking into what framework we will be assessing companies. So that's our next big thing. And then a shout out, so for the people here, we have launched insights into our new reporting cycle. So as I was telling you, we were doing it for like 4 years, this sectoral benchmarking, right? And different amount of companies for each of our sectors. Now we're upscaling our analysis to 2,000 companies. So the 2,000 biggest companies of the world, almost 50% of GHG emissions. These are the companies that we're analyzing, and we will publish those results with all of our indicators: social, nature, food, urban, gender, and climate, in January 2026 in Davos. But we have published like a spoiler in our website, particularly focusing on transition planning and just transition, where you can find a little bit about where the company is going, right? So if the NDCs show us the trajectory, meaning where are we going in terms of policies for the world, we hope that our assessment can show us where the real economy is going, right? So where the companies are implementing or not their transition plans, and where we're headed based on the real economy implementation. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. I love those gifts of a new report is launching, and I'm always writing down the dates so I can keep track of them. So super excited. I hope you guys also write it down and check out the report. And also, I think that definitely is the future, right? We cannot do things separated. The decarbonization plan, circularity plan, social impact plan. I think it's important to understand in depth each area, but really make sure that this is a true transformation, holistic transformation for the entire organization. Thank you so much for all of those that attended in person. Also, those that have been following us online, I hope you enjoyed the event. I thought it was super, super interesting to have all you 5 panel speakers. So we're going to end now. If anyone has questions later, you're more than invited. Thank you so much.